They've met with the pastor week after week. He's taught them our precepts and Christ Jesus to seek. He shared the law of our God, which we strive to keep, the prayers, the creeds, and the sacraments deep. Now these young saints are right to partake in Christ's body and blood, all for his sake. A gift you are seeking to commemorate this? Ad Crucem has just what you won't want to miss. We've got icons, art, ornaments, jewelry, and more, greeting cards, crucifixes, posters, gifts galore. Your catechized friend will love what you give and treasure the gift all the days that they live. Visit adcrucem.com. That's ADCRUCEM.com.
Listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
Today is a book club wrap-up episode. These are always fun conversations. We get to dig into a book that we've all very recently read and discussed in the Facebook group. This time it was Elizabeth von Arnim's The Enchanted April. I personally think this was quite a magical book. It was delightful. That's the word that keeps coming to my head whenever I think about reading this book and experiencing all of these things in my head. So this was a delightful read. Rachel, take it away. What are we going to talk about today?
Oh, so many things. So back in December, when we were recording our interview with Katie Sherman, she had told us, if you want to be creative, you got to read good writers. Good writers like Elizabeth von Arnim, who wrote The Enchanted April. And she said, go read that book and it will just help you be more creative. We thought, all right, well, we'll save that for a rainy day. And then it was a rainy day in January when we needed a new book club read. And my mind flashed back to The Enchanted April. And I thought, well, our next book club will be happening in March when we'll all be in the mood for some good spring weather, like an Enchanted April. Let's just do that. So we did. And it was wonderful. The story was written in the 1920s by an English author who writes about 4 women, all of whom are miserable in different ways, who decide to gamble big, and a couple of them using most of their life savings to go in on a castle in Italy, renting the ultimate Airbnb, and get away out of a particularly wet and miserable winter spring in London, get away together. They're all strangers before this happens, but they're all friends by the end, and I won't spoil it. Oh, wait, we're doing book club discussion. I'll spoil it all at once.
Spoilers.
Spoil it, girl.
Long story short, it turns out to have been a very good gamble for each of them because they all find some sort of resolution to the various things, opportunities for self-reflection, for self-discovery, for reconciliation within their marriages. And it's a wonderful adventure. It also is just pure escapist fantasy to think about spending a month at a castle by the sea in Italy, and the numbers of flowers that she describes popping out. I'm not really sure that it is biologically possible for all those species to bloom within the same month. I feel like she squished an entire year's worth of flowers into like 1 month in Italy. I've never been to Italy in April, so I don't know. Maybe it's possible.
This is a literary tool we call the willful suspension of disbelief.
As a gardener, I had to willfully suspend my disbelief reading through this, going, I didn't know those things could bloom in the same season. But you know what? I wish they could. And that's good enough for me. So it is a wonderful book full of sunshine and flowers and women who were miserable becoming happy. And it's just gorgeous. So I'm so glad we had this adventure together. That's what I thought about it. What did you think about it?
I want to open my remarks. The introduction to this book. And for some reason, I'm a big fan of introductions to books these days, even though I think I just skipped them when I was a kid because I thought I was bored.
Irrelevant.
Okay, but here's the thing. So it was like the first 70 or 65 degree day that we had a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, I have to read this book because book club is happening. And so I pulled out my book and I went and sat outside for the first time this year. And I opened it to the introduction. I was like, I need to read the introduction because they're generally very informative, right? And it says, open a window, or better yet, wander into a garden. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm there.
Step one.
Find the kids. Settle down. Breathe in the scent. I was like, okay, I'm doing that. Whatever it is, but breathe especially deep if there's wisteria in the air, which there was not, but that's okay. Put on a hat, which I had on, or at least some sunscreen, which I did not. Turn off your phone. I did that. Now you're ready to read Elizabeth von Arnim's The Enchanted April. So that was my introduction to this book.
Man,
like,
scholarly introductions have come a long way since I was in graduate school.
Right, I know. It was fantastic. And then I ended up having to punt and do the audiobook because for some reason, in the last couple of weeks, once Lent hit, I had no time to read anything in my life.
You mean the introduction wasn't like, close this book, drop it, and go do something else?
No, it wasn't, sadly enough. So I'm actually very excited to go back and read the book since it's not super long. I've come to love reading actual books thanks to book club, and you, Rachel, I blame you for this. But now I have the book and I'm going to go back and read it. But I absolutely love this book.
I'm smiling so big right now. Aww.
Like, I take my lunch outside and go read a book outside now at work. Like, this is my thing now.
Beautiful.
Anyway.
Sarah, and for future reference, if ever I call you a nerd, the correct response is, I know you are, but what am I?
Also a nerd, truthfully. But this book was so, I was laughing out loud when I was listening to it. The end of it had these twists and turns that I did not expect. The imagery was just beautiful in my head. I was Google mapping to like see the places where they were so I could get the actual images in my head. I have actually been to this general region of the world when we were in Nice, France. It's not exactly in the same place, but close enough that I kind of had a picture of what these places would look like. And like, I don't know, it was such a fantastic getaway kind of book in my head of, I don't know, it was just so happy. It made me so happy. I was so hopeful and joyous, and like I had all these nice emotions going on because I was like so afraid that things would end badly because I wasn't sure. And then everything just ended so wonderfully and I was so happy.
Nice. That was nice. I thought it was really hilarious.
Yes.
Like, it just was so funny. The two funniest parts of this book. When Rose Arbuthnot and Lottie Wilkins get off the train in Italy.
Yes.
And they are driven by carriage to San Salvatore, and they don't know Italian, and they think they've been kidnapped and are going to be brought somewhere.
Midnight.
We're going to die.
We're going to die. Like, and the other funny part to me was when Carolyn Dester runs into Lottie Wilkins' husband wearing nary but a towel because there was an explosion in the bathroom or something.
I was laughing so hard.
Like, you honestly, there are some scenes in this book that would make for like a modern day comedy. Like, it just, like, talking about a book that makes you feel more creative. I'm like,
yeah,
let's do a modern day version of this in a movie.
I mean, there are 4 of us.
Actually,
totally do it.
There is a wonderful movie from the 90s that I saw, and it's fantastic. It's actually really quite faithful to the book. I don't know if it's quite as hilarious. It's got a lot of heart. Like, I've definitely got it on my Netflix DVD list right now to bring home for another viewing.
There's a series too on BBC, I think, on BBC.
You financial person.
Yeah. But like, yeah, I totally think there could be a modern day version of this.
Oh, they should redo it. You're right. They'd probably mess it up now, though. Just gonna say it.
Yeah. I have that movie. I was waiting until after we recorded this podcast to watch the movie because I didn't want to cloud this discussion with movie things instead of book things.
It's also a musical too, I think.
Is it really?
Yes. It's like there's like a Broadway musical of it.
Wow. That would be cool.
Well, yeah. I thought it was a delight, I think is the word that I would use for that.
I agree. That is a great adjective for it. I also found it just very charming.
Yes.
And I mean, there were elements of it that were sort of idealized, but also it was not all idealized. And so they didn't feel like paper cutout characters sort of thing that were really just one dimensional. But they had real motivations, and you got to explore some of that. And I really enjoyed it. The sort of story arcs that you got for each of them, it was great. I really liked it.
I think one of my favorite scenes is when the Lottie and Rose, the sort of drivers behind this adventure, tried to get there early so that the subletters they could get everything nice and ready for the other two women whom they're subletting the place to. But the other two women actually show up a day before them. And so Lottie and Rose are just disappointed. They're like, we wanted to pick out the best rooms for you. And they say, oh, we already did that.
Did that anyway.
We wanted to fill them with flowers. Oh, we had the servants do that already. And they're just like, what are we, chopped liver?
And like, here's the other thing too, is like each individual woman is so remarkably different from the other.
Yes.
And there's not a whole lot of nuance written behind them, but you can just tell, like Mrs. I was going to say Mrs. Fletcher.
Wrong
book. Mrs. Fisher is sort of like this old curmudgeonly spinster type. Caroline is like a snobby, like movie star-ish. Lottie and Rose are like BFF goals. Honestly, I love those two
and
together.
yet they're so different too. I mean, Lottie is just this. She's a bit weird, honestly.
Yes,
that's why I relate to her.
Yeah, and Rose is on her way to becoming a living martyr.
Yep.
She's the ultimate church lady for all the wrong reasons.
Was so charming too, like how they met in the opening of the book. I was just like, this is the cutest thing ever.
Yeah, try going up to the ultimate church lady and say, I can see how miserable you are.
Are you reading about the castle in San Salvatore? Are you reading about that?
That was great. All right. We also, besides just simply raving about how much we enjoyed our little, well, let's say tourist adventure in Italy, literarily speaking, we also usually dig into some of the more in-depth questions. We had our book club discussion last week. It was wonderful. Started a little slowly, I think, partly because a lot of people are doing less Facebook for Lent, and also because my fault, I might have not gotten the announcement up quite as early and often as I should have because it sneaked up on me because of Lent. So we'll try to plan that out a little better in the future and make sure we get plenty of notice and maybe avoid times when lots of people are fasting from social media. But that said, it was a fantastic discussion. We talked about, everything under the sun, just about. And so I tossed it to each of you. Which of the topics we covered during that discussion do you want to talk about here today?
So one of the questions that was asked in the book club really brings the significance of like when you're world weary and you're kind of at your wit's end. Vacation is one way to decompress. Changes of scenery is one way to decompress, rest, relaxation, etc. And question 3 was, where do you go and what do you do to refresh yourself when you find yourself, in Lottie's words, miserable and longing for something else? And maybe I just want to talk about this because I'm very excited to go. Every summer, my family will rent a beach cottage in Sunset Beach, North Carolina. And it's like one of those duplex condo things, like right on the shore. It sleeps like 20 people. So it's a bunch of people from our family just kind of hanging out. We can walk to the beach. We can ride bikes. We can do whatever. It is a much needed respite from the hustle and bustle of like work and church responsibilities and, family responsibilities and the whole nine. Like, just like you get there and you bring in all your luggage, then you go out on the deck off of your bedroom and you just
breathe.
Like breathe in the ocean air. And it's just like that first hit of island air, right? Like it is so good. And one thing that I do want to say, because Rose really is sort of something, isn't she? With, as involved as she is with the church and the poor, and like even as we were nearing the book's end, she's sort of seeing and maybe is even frustrated by her life's work and her focus on the poor and doing church stuff. And I feel like this book should serve as an admonition to our church workers that God did very, very good work for 6 days. But on the 7th day, he took a break, yo. Like, make time for yourself. Yes, the work of the church continues, and our church workers play a very pivotal role in that. But it's also very important to make time for yourself and your family to get that rest and respite for a job well done.
Yeah.
So, Rose, that was a good move for you, sis.
Rose Arbuthnot is a just textbook case of burnout at the beginning of the book. And I love that scene where she started to think about San Salvatore, but she's got to go basically do a fundraising speech where she's going to speak before in front of, well, lower class people, trying to get them to give money for other lower class people. But she's so distracted by the idea of actually taking the first vacation she's had in a decade that the vicar is rather disappointed in how little money she brings in. The fund drive is not going well because her heart's not in it, because she needs to get away and be refreshed. But that's it. Rose's relationship with the vicar and the way he takes advantage of her guilt to get all sorts of free labor out of her is kind of a little dysfunctional. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's true.
I relate to that not the vicar part, the vacation part. Sorry. The first part of our conversation last year was just like, I don't even want to talk about it. It was so bad. Like 2021 was terrible for my family. I mean, for a lot of people, but we dealt with a lot of stuff last year. And by the end of the year, I was just like, I need a break. And we generally always travel around Christmas, usually to visit family. But this year, the way it ended up, we ended up just going to Detroit for a week. And I don't need to say how much I love Detroit, but this is like the first time.
Y'all already know.
But this is the first time that I had actually gone to Detroit in such a long time to just kind of be there and have some time to actually relax. My Christmas present, because my husband knows me very well, was to just wander around Detroit for an afternoon and like go take pictures of things and wander around buildings and see all like this fun architecture and stuff and just be a tourist. It was so stinking fun. Like I took just like a random selfie of us by the river. You can see Canada in the background. And I made it into
second favorite place.
It's true.
Second favorite place.
I put that on one of the canvases that I buy randomly. And so I have this canvas of just the two of us, like in our jackets, mismatched jackets, on my bedroom wall now, because that picture just reminds me of how just flat out happy we were in that moment of just wandering around. And I felt so much just like peace after that trip, and I did not want to go back to work. I was like, this is what I needed, but I need like 3 more weeks of this, because it was just the beginning of it. That feeling is so deep, though.
Yes.
Funny,
You can recall it at any time, right?
Yes. Yeah, and like you can feel it again.
And it's
just
fleeting
thinking
because you're
about
like,
it.
shut up, Grzewski, you're not on vacation, get back to work.
it's funny you should say I need like 3 more weeks of this, because I had a similar thought in December when we were planning our trip to Michigan for Christmas. And I thought, I could really use about 3 extra weeks of Christmas break. And then I thought, I'm a homeschool mom. I'm going to take those 3 extra weeks. My teenagers and my husband, they will survive without me. In fact, they'll probably grow into more fully developed human beings without me around. And my younger 2, we can just homeschool from the 2nd floor in Sparta, Michigan. And it was so refreshing. Like I like you, Sarah, I had like a year last year, like a year I never want to repeat. And I had not taken any real time to rest and refresh after that. And so it wasn't like we did anything fancy or special. We just changed our scenery, enjoyed some good winter weather and some time to reconnect with family. And it was so good. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, like all of you, last year I got to have a vacation also in the summer, same as Brie. And this time we went to the coast of Maine, which I had not spent time on before, but it was one of those magical sort of vacations where it was truly just a utterly refreshing, non-stressful
Yes.
occasion. Just gorgeous scenery to look at and no stress interactions with family and just perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
So
They did a lot of just sitting around doing nothing.
Yes.
They did.
And that's my
Mhm.
favorite. That's my favorite
Yeah.
part about this. It was like, and she
Yeah.
was sitting and writing a letter.
Well,
And then they went in the garden and sat some more. And then they sat out on the battlements.
and this apparently
And then
the
we're out-
staff of the castle are just completely astounded at this behavior. They're like, normally people come to Italy, they like do stuff.
Right.
And these guys
They're
are
so
just
bored.
doing nothing.
They're just sitting here.
They were like, by the time the husband comes and he blows up the bathroom, they're like, something's
Well, even like, wasn't Mrs. Fisher like, don't bother me for 4 weeks. Like, I'll go if you don't bother me for 4
Well,
weeks.
there were two doors onto her own little claimed space, and so she had the servants move stuff in front of one of the doors, and on the outside move the flowers, and the servants are like, nobody's going to be able to use the door, and she's like, nobody will want to.
Oh my goodness, Mrs. Fisher! I wanted to slap her at the beginning of the book about 5 different times, but
Oh my
that's
gosh.
that's
Almost to the very end, honestly.
right.
So whatever happened to that sitting room? I sort of wish the one she'd completely closed off so that nobody could access it from either direction.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever discover it again, or is it still closed off?
Well, after the time she chased out Lottie, you know what I think happened is that she stopped using it and no one else used it either. That they all started spending all their time outside.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Together in the dining room.
She was the worst.
Caroline was like so mad when anyone would find her. She's like, I'm going to ignore everybody, even when they look at me. Don't look in my direction.
How many times can you pretend to be sleeping?
Meanwhile, Mrs. Fisher's cutting spaghetti with a knife and a fork. Come on now. She's like eating, she can't eat spaghetti. Like it's just flopping out of her mouth everywhere. Get real. Yikes.
So good.
It is so good.
Yeah.
It is so good.
All right. Who's got another question?
So I'm going to talk about the one where it's question number 4.
Oh, going real deep.
Yeah, to the Facebook discussion group. But that, you commented that you were initially put off by von Arnim's running commentary on Rose's cold, dead religiosity. And you started to wonder if the book was actually openly hostile to Christian faith. And I agree. I did notice that. And I, especially at the beginning, before Rose's transformation took hold, I had that same question. But, you said as you went on, you began to see a more complex metaphor unfolding, a beautiful portrait of law and gospel played out in vivid colors at the heaven of San Salvatore, the Holy Savior. So what, if anything else, can we learn theologically from this book? Are there other examples of that? So I definitely noticed that. Initially, I did wonder, was there a hostility? Was that a uncharitable evaluation of her faith? But as you went on and you were hearing things from her perspective, the chapters that were inside her head, you definitely got the understanding, yes, she's burned out, but she's also like, she is only ever serving and she doesn't ever get the being served. And like the whole idea of that's what God does for us, that he comes to us and he serves us, and she never gets that. And I don't know, honestly, like maybe there is a metaphor or an analogy that's happening in this book. Maybe the author is a Christian, maybe not. I think you could speculate on that. Maybe there's something else out there that makes it more clear. But it was something that I was just slowly became more aware of, that she just had no sense of, like you said, all of her service is motivated by her guilt, by the sting of the law. She's none of it is a joyful response. And she never is like falling back in, in weakness and receiving that grace that's freely offered to us all. And so that's something I noticed. And then as Brie, you were saying that, like the whole, like, let this be a lesson to our church workers everywhere that God worked on 7 days or 6 days. And then on the seventh day, he rested. Even church workers with that seventh day, often worship is partly work. And so that is that's a real challenge to navigate on how do you receive even as you give? How do you do both? And so that's something that I was just struck by as I was reading it. I don't necessarily feel like I drew great answers or anything like that from it, but that's one of the things that it got me thinking about theologically.
Yeah. I think for me, it was a reminder that being in God's creation, to be thankful that God that God has created such beautiful places and people. I mean, I really think that a lot of this book is a celebration of people and places and nature and camaraderie. It's just a really feel-good book, right? But whether Elizabeth von Arnim is coming from a place of theology or not, we can look at all of those good, warm fuzzies and know that God gives us relationships. He gives us opportunities to rest. He gives us beautiful places to see. He reconciles people to each other. So I think that was really top of mind for me theologically. That, and Rose obviously was not a Lutheran.
No.
Because grace was a foreign term.
Yes. I think my thoughts on this are still developing. So like I'm trying to put things together in my head while you guys are talking. So hopefully this makes sense. But
yes, do it.
We believe that we receive Christ in word and sacrament and not like out and like we don't commune with God in nature.
Right.
But there is also something very healing about unplugging, getting away and being in nature. And that's a huge theme, I think, for me in this book that, they're talking about San Salvatore being this magical place of healing and that it changes you and it changes your heart. That is true for us too. Like we're all talking about going on these vacations, being in nature, being away from things, unplugging, having time to just kind of let your mind relax. And for us as Lutherans maybe and Christians in general, a lot of times that means that we will start thinking about what God has given us and the blessings that he has. That may not be true for everybody, but when you have that Christian worldview and that is how you live your life, in those moments, we tend to turn towards thinking about gifts that we've received and being thankful for the things that we've received. So those things kind of go hand in hand. And the other thing, and as I say this, it may not make sense, but like this concept of this, I'm winging it here. This concept of grace, like the entire setting of San Salvatore in a way is like a type of grace because it had this power to change everybody's hearts that managed to be there. And I don't know if that's a very theological thing, but like, as Lottie said, everybody that went there ended up with a change of heart. Like there's just something about the scenery in San Salvatore that had this ability to change them. So
yeah.
Weird tangent.
Yeah.
I love going to LCMS churches on vacation. I'm just going to say that.
It is fun.
Me too. Yep.
To be clear.
Love it. And I'm going to take the metaphor a little further even because that's how it worked for me. As I don't think von Arnim was intentionally being theological. I really don't. I looked into her life a little bit and I just don't think that that's really her thing. But and even more so seeing the way she regards Rose's religion, which is cold, which is dead, which is entirely driven by guilt. For those of you new to the book, Rose's husband writes naughty novels under a pseudonym. And that's how they get their income. And she is so guilt-ridden about this. She gives all of her money to the church and all of her free time to raising more money for the poor.
Yeah.
Like the worst kind of religion.
The church is like, your husband writes filthy dime store novels. We don't want your money, lady.
No, well, she goes to the vicar. She's like, this is where the money came from. Is it okay? And he's like, well,
You don't ask questions like that here.
I'll keep it to myself for your sake. And yes, I think the money's okay. So basically, she's using the church as a money launderer.
Whoa.
And as she goes to San Salvatore, she's finding that this religion falls apart and that she's even having trouble praying. Although almost all of her prayers before this were basically, please make my husband not so wicked, which again is, I think that you're missing sort of the point of what faith is supposed to do and what prayer is supposed to do. Yes, do pray for your husbands, especially if they're wicked, but it's more than that. But I think that every really good story is only good because it has echoes of the really best story, which is what we see in scripture. So that whether authors, this is my own personal philosophy here, but whether authors mean to or not, if they tell a really good story, it's because it's got echoes of God's story in it. Yep. And I think she accidentally named her castle San Salvatore, Holy Savior. Because here we see, it's like, you know how in The Wizard of Oz, it starts out all in sepia tones and then you step into Oz and it's all colorful? That's exactly the kind of imagery that we get from this book between the rainy misery of London and Rose taking the public transit to go speak to the poor who don't want to give money to the other poor. And, you know, then she steps into San Salvatore, and it's exactly the experience we have when we encounter the gospel. When we stop trying to save ourselves via the law, and we encounter the pure grace of the gospel. And not only does it heal us, does it refresh us, but it does change us. So that the goodness that Rose and all the rest of them have at the end of the book is a genuine goodness. I've been flipping through the book trying to find a quote, and I can't find the quote. Sigh, but I think I remember it well enough because back in London, nobody thinks Lottie and Rose are that good looking. But when they get down to Italy, a couple days there, and everyone's like, "Wow, did not realize these women were actually pretty, but they really are, and they're younger than I thought they were too." And the servants aren't the only ones to notice this; their husbands noticed this as well. And the line that I love is, "The beauty around them made them love, and love made them beautiful."
Yes.
And that is, I think, exactly what the gospel does in our lives. It gives us such an enormous, a garden of beauty that fills us. You know, his love makes us love, and that love makes us beautiful. And that love is the love from which faith and goodness, real goodness, not faker goodness, not, you know, Rose at the beginning of the book goodness, but true goodness comes from that love, from living in San Salvatore always. Because spiritually, that is our home. We live in the Holy Savior. And so now I want to reread the book through the lens of that metaphor and see what it's like to step out from under the burden of sin and law and guilt and into the light and wisteria-scented glory of the gospel. So that's...
And all the flowers grow at the exact same time and the exact same season. Which is probably what heaven is going to be like, right?
It really is. And they keep calling it heaven, which was a little jarring at first. But if you read it through the metaphor, it works because if you live in grace, you live in heaven, even if you're still on earth.
Right. Yeah. There was a lot of discussion of beauty in the book, too, which, I don't know, I was trying to... I picked it up too late to like track it, how it may have changed throughout the book. But when I go back and read it, there's so much talk of beauty in different ways and facets. I don't know.
This is such a Sarah book. You are you love aesthetics so much that this is, I just see you here.
Rachel, this book actually reminded me a fair bit of another book that you previously had considered for book club. And I ended up reading it, and I loved it. It's another one written. This one is written in the 40s, I believe. It's the Elizabeth Googe. Bird in the Tree. I think it's the name of it. I think it actually has a couple different names. There's an oddness about the titles, like it goes by different names. But it's another one that is beautifully descriptive, and that one definitely does have clear Christian themes running through it. That one, it's there's no guessing on analogies or metaphors or anything like that. But it's another one that's very delightful and highly descriptive. Ooh. And you just want to go and live in that little house on the coast of England.
Yeah.
In the woods, and it's fantastic.
Well, now I need to read that.
Yes. Elizabeth Goudge.
Yeah.
I'm glad we didn't do it for book club at that point, because it's any book that is pretty much out of print is really hard to get to source for a large number of people, and no, it's not an audiobook, you know. But yes, Elizabeth Goudge was my mother-in-law's favorite author, and the book was just, I found it on her shelf and I just loved it. So, okay, we got one more question to go. Sarah, which one do you want? Pick one out of the hat.
All right. So this one is question 7. Basically how Lottie, I love her.
She's the weird one.
I love her character. How basically like so much of the book is driven by Lottie's leaps of faith, and she just like does stuff and is like, hey, let's do this thing. Let's go to Italy and spend all of our money and get other people that we don't even know to come with us, 'cause it'll be fun. And so the question is, are there moments in your past when you've made a Lottie-like leap of faith? How did things turn out? And are there leaps of faith that you are currently longing to make in your own life? What would you do if you had Lottie's hopeful heart beating in your chest?
Juicy.
I think, and maybe this is just my personality, but like I'm always thinking of all these random things I could be doing. And like, ooh, what if I made a total career change and did this entirely different thing for my life because it would be so fun? And then I don't actually, because I really love what I do. But this is what I daydream about, the different leaps of faith that I could do and the different places we could live in the United States or around the world and what it would be like. And I don't know. I have a very wild imagination. But then I was thinking back through my life, I think there's been a lot of leaps of faith of varying levels of leap. I don't know, like just picking out the college I was going to. That was a huge leap of faith, and I ended up, changing my mind at the last minute after I had already registered for classes at one place. I was like, just kidding, I want to go to Concordia. And I like completely changed my major and moved out of state, like all last minute. So like that was a leap of faith. I mean, getting married in a way is a leap of faith. Like you put a lot of thought and
you may not realize it at the time, but if you look back, you will realize it was a total leap of faith.
Yeah, like you don't know what's going to happen in 30 years after you choose your person. Like who knows what life is going to throw at you, and you have to deal with it together. And so like that's a leap of faith on a different level. I mean, I quit my full-time job to work at a triathlon store because I didn't like the job that I was doing anymore. And so I just completely changed careers and tried something new in retail of all things, which was terrifying. But like there was that. Moving to St. Louis, like even applying for the job that got me to move to St. Louis, that was a huge leap of faith. Moving, to a different city in a different place, that took a lot of a leap of faith. And what I find is funny is even starting this podcast.
Oh my goodness, this was a huge leap of faith.
It was a huge leap of faith. We're like, there's nothing like this, so we're just going to try it and see what happens. And lo and behold, it's been over 2.5 years? 2.5 years?
Is it 2.5 years?
This is episode like 130.
Feels like a long time.
Something. It's been a long time. So like,
not that there's anything wrong with that.
And no. And maybe this is just me and how I am a risk averse person, but I also love adventure. And so I like these calculated risk adventures.
Calculated risk adventures. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Make sure that
that's a new book genre right there. Choose your own adventure. It's calculated risk.
But I think that in addition to the Christian Lutheran worldview of like, you pray about things, you have wisdom, you seek wisdomly advice, wise advice from people. But then like you just do stuff. You make a decision and you do it, and then you see where it leads. And that's kind of how I've lived most of my adult life, of having these adventures and trusting that this is part of the path that I'm on. I'm serving my neighbors while I'm doing these things. It's just kind of how I live. So I relate so heavily with Lottie. I want to be her.
Well, and I think part of it too is a gift that God gives us, is the relationships that we have in our lives and the support that the people who walk alongside us, who help us take those calculated risk adventures or go on the calculated risk adventures with you. And so there's that support network there too, that you may feel less risk averse around certain people because you know that they'll be there for you.
Yep. Yeah.
I actually became a very annoying person to my husband after reading this book and Lottie, and I'm like, she took all these leaps of faith. We should reevaluate in every life choice we've ever made and make some huge leap of faith and like, I don't know, go be lumberjacks in Alaska or something, you know?
Yes.
I want to do that.
Ice road truckers.
And he's like, Rachel, there's a reason we have a hard and fast rule not to make major life decisions in February.
Oh, that's wise.
But at the same time, there are, of course, smaller Lottie-like leaps of faith that one can make. I'm starting to plan summer vacation for us. And I'll tell you what, I'm being a little bit more adventurous and less stingy with both time and money than I would have been had I not read this book. To realize that time is short, especially when you're raising kids, and adventures, they may be a lot of hassle and a lot of expense, but the experiences that you enjoy together, the memories that you take away, there's something priceless about that. And so I'm really, really glad I read this book right now. And it gave me the courage to say, you know what, let's have some big adventure together and not worry about whether it dips into our savings a little bit, whether it, takes up more time, whether you have to like use up more leave time than you had budgeted for right now. Let's do something big together. And of course it's us, so it's not going to be huge. Like we're not going to Italy, but maybe we'll do more than just go to Grandma and Grandpa's house this year.
Yes.
Yes.
So thanks, Lottie, and all the girls for that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I feel like that's what life is, right? Is a leap of faith. Like everything you do, you never know how it's going to turn out. I guess maybe it's more the attitude of how you go into it and whether you do that with a positive, hopeful expectation or a fearful expectation. But either way, it's a leap and you go into it blind.
Well, and I think a lot of it is retrospective too. Like,
yeah.
I think back, the 10, 15 years since college and all of the sort of wreck and turmoil that my husband and I have been through, but having come out onto the other side of, joblessness and indecision and, poverty and unemployment and all of those things, like I can look back now and say, wow, like God is faithful. And I think that's another thing is that we can glean from this book is that he is always faithful.
He is.
And so that's the kind of attitude I personally try to bring, like, as we think about call day coming up or, what does life look like in 2 or 3 years? So it's, we can look back on all those instances in our lives where, we took risks, whether or not we knew we were taking them at the time.
Yeah.
But we can see this theme of God's faithfulness threading throughout. And you can see, okay, here's point A to point Z, and here's how each risk affected the outcome. But you see God in all of it.
Yeah. Well, and everybody kind of lives on a different level of the leap of faith continuum too. There are people who are continually doing new things and trying new things. And then there are other people who don't do much anything new. Like they get a job and get a house and get a car. And that's about it for the rest of their life.
That's a leap of faith in itself.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think, whenever we're weighing leaps of faith, we have the wonderful Lutheran doctrine of vocation to help us decide whether it's a responsible leap of faith. I mean, you say risk averse. Partly our risk aversion comes from being responsible and realizing that, to use my lumberjacks in Alaska idea, we have 4 kids. Like that would not be a good, and my husband is in the ministry and, I have all these other responsibilities going on. And that's not something that would be a responsible leap of faith at this point. We're not actually, we didn't.
All the things you want for yourself. You want to be a lumberjack in Alaska?
No, that was the wildest thing I could think of. I wouldn't actually share one of my real ones with you.
I don't want
on here. It was a really personal question. I almost didn't put it up in book club because I was like asking people what leap of faith they're longing to make in their own life. I don't think I would share that with people.
Juicy.
Juicy.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's crazy out there. But yes, as Lutherans, we see our calling to serve our neighbors, especially those that God has put closest to us in our lives, as a way to judge whether, okay, is this leap of faith going to let me do that better or worse? Lumberjack in Alaska, that would not help me be a better wife, mother, podcaster, etc. However, taking a vacation with my family somewhere special this summer, that would probably tick off all those vocation boxes. And so maybe that's a leap of faith that I should take.
I think the biggest one that we've been through as a family together, my husband decided to quit his job last year and start doing things for music for the church. And that was a huge leap of faith for us. And we knew that going into it. And it took some prayer and some talking to people, but he had wanted to leave the retail world for a while and do some things for the church. And it hadn't been the right time until that point. And so now he's doing several different things, but they're all for the good of the church. And he is just, he's so good at what he does.
Hadn't you guys just bought a house when that happened?
We bought a house in 2020. So we had been in our house for like a year. But yeah.
How did that make you feel as a new homeowner?
Terrified. I'm being honest. But at the same time, we had been through so many other situations that I was not really sure how we were going to maybe pay our bills. But like the Lord has always provided for us. There is always something that he's just always provided for us. And I knew that. And so it's just this like walking with my husband as he made these choices to do these things that I knew was going to be good for him and good for the church and good for all the people he'd be able to serve. And also knowing that I myself was going through the lesson of trust and not worrying and, relying on God for these things that I know that he will provide for us. It may not be the way that I think he should provide them for me.
Funny how that is, huh?
Right. Yeah. But I know that he will provide for us. And so, that is the largest example and the most vulnerable example for us in the last however long it's been.
This could be a whole entire episode.
Yes.
The more you trust, the less you fear. And I think that's ultimately when you talk about a leap of faith, it's about answering the question. And I ask this of myself and of my husband and my kids all the time. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Because our fears keep us back so often. Lottie's fears keep her from doing anything, even from like buying lilies for herself at the florist, spending any dime on anything extravagant except fish for her husband because he really likes the good fish. She's just so afraid. But when she stops being afraid, when she does something that requires courage and conviction, and she shows up and she finds herself in heaven, decides it was worth every penny. And after that point, she's not afraid of anything.
Yeah.
And that's when things really start happening in her marriage, in her life. And it's, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
Yeah. I would do lots of things.
For the record, if my husband was infatuated with me or like falling in love with me again, if he pinched my ears.
Yeah, what was with that?
I'd be like, ow, what are you doing, weirdo?
I looked this up. I couldn't find it anywhere, but I did wonder if maybe that was a euphemism.
Yeah, I suspect.
Oh!
Say no more. Moving on. We need to pick a new book, ladies.
I just broke. My brain is broken.
On that note,
yo. I'm going to have to Google that.
I already did. You won't find anything.
Not at work. No. Full disclosure, I am going to look at that, though.
Oh, boy.
I'll have safe search on, though. Don't worry.
On that note,
dig out of that hole.
What shall we read next? I'll admit I've been so scatterbrained lately that I haven't normally I come in and I'm like, let's do this genre or this genre. And if we have this genre, here are these three choices. And if we do this genre, we have these three choices. I have nothing right now.
I like it, though.
Welcome to Lent.
Welcome to life.
I have become Lottie, I think, thanks to this book, because this is exactly what she would do. So I will think through a couple things on the fly, but I'm inviting you guys too. What do you want to read next? Like genres, books, authors? I'm open. We've had so many good choices. I feel like we can't really miss at this point.
Talking about God's faithfulness, right? I feel like I have the perfect spring/summer read. It is a work of nonfiction. And I believe this writer was on a past list of options for nonfiction.
Okay. I'm all ears.
So when we met with Katie Schuerman in December, during the episode where she recommended the Enchanted April, she also recommended getting a work of theological nonfiction. And she mentioned the author's name, John Kleinig.
Yes.
Oh,
And I looked him up on Amazon, and the book, The Theology of the Body, came up in my search. And I said, well, I'm all about that body pause life, so let's get it. And so I have it. I have not opened it yet. But in an interesting turn of events,
I also bought that book like a month after you did.
independently of each other.
For very different reasons, because I knew of the book for some reason, just working in this building probably, but then also on the Friends for Life podcast, Steph Neugebauer had John Kleinig on to talk about that book and the theology of the body, and I listened to that podcast and it was spectacular. And so I was like, well, I have to read the book now. So I also bought this book. I also have not read it.
I feel like this is a Von Arnim-esque round of serendipity.
I actually got the book back in January myself and have started reading it. So.
Hi-oh!
am I the only one that does not already own this book? This is hilarious.
We all beat you to it this time, Rachel.
All right. Well, I am happy to take on the challenge. Y'all have a head start on me, but if this is the book we're reading, I think it'll be great to read in the summertime when we are all moving our bodies and maybe seeing more of our bodies than we've seen in a while. So it's a good time to be thinking about the theology of the body and what it means to be embodied souls. I hope he gets into some Rene Descartes because that's really interesting, but we'll see. I don't know. We shall see where we go with this. And I know I've seen a lot of people on social media talking about this book, both pastors and lay people, and it's been recommended to me by more than one quarter. So I'm guessing the fact that the same reason that I don't have a good book list is probably the reason why I haven't yet devoted more attention to this book. And that is, for the last several months, I have been reading classic literature very slowly. Some books that I have never read in my life, but always thought I should. So 2 in particular that have been beautiful journeys, but very slow journeys. John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, which is an amazing
Seems
book.
appropriate.
It's wonderful.
To read slowly.
Yeah.
But yes, read it slowly. And I would never choose it for book club, so I couldn't do that.
Thanks, Rachel.
Maybe
You're
the
the
like
best.
junior abridged version. I don't know. It's a journey, and then the other one is another journey book. But Dante's Divine Comedy.
Oh, good.
I've made it through the Inferno, hell, and now I'm trudging through Purgatory. Again, not perhaps the best choice for a Lutheran Ladies Book
Sounds
Club.
hilarious.
But I just read a little bit at a time. This classic medieval Italian Catholic, very Catholic literature, and it's good, even though Luther would have had a few things to say about it, but reading it with my Lutheran filters on, I'm able to enjoy it quite a lot. So, but I'm not going to ask any of you to read Dante's Inferno for the Lutheran Ladies Book Club. But since that's where I am in my life right now, I'm really, really glad that y'all were able to come through for me and suggest a book that I would have thought of had I not been in purgatory.
Yeah.
It's a God thing.
Yes. All right. So ladies, we will be doing book club probably within the first week or 2 of June. So just mark your calendars. I will probably try to send out many more notifications at various points along the way. But we will be reading John Kleinig's wonderfully made A Protestant Theology of the Body. And the discussion on that should be fierce.
I'm very excited.
One other thing that our last question on the book club this time was if there are any format changes we want to see. Again, it started out kind of slowly for a variety of reasons this time. And one thing that I think will be making this change right away is that I will be taking the questions that we ask in the group and seeing if we can create a downloadable PDF version of those. So if you are not on Facebook, you can still reflect on the books with us on your own, either journaling. I think that would be a great way to engage in book club, or even better, get some of your church friends together, your neighbors, your sisters, your cousins, your besties, whoever, pop open a bottle of wine or crack out a pitcher of iced tea or lemonade, sit down, and we will provide you the discussion questions to host your own in-person book club, because as much as some of us love social media, in-person is always better if you can manage it. So be thinking about that. If you would like to, we will make sure to have they'll probably be very, very rudimentary at first. Think like Word docs turned into PDFs, unless Sarah the Canva Queen wants to work her magic on it.
Officially licensed.
But we want to find a way that people can participate, even if you're not on Facebook. So we're working on it. Thanks for your patience.
And we have our e-newsletter now too.
Yes.
And we've been announcing things through there as well. So that's another avenue to connect with us for book club and listening to these episodes and all of those good things. Okay, so our next book club, Wonderfully Made by John Kleinig. I'm super duper looking forward to this. It is next in the pile of my books after I finished the current book that I'm reading. So
yes,
that makes me very happy that it lines up almost perfectly. You can find book club in our Facebook group, the Lutheran Ladies Lounge on Facebook. It's under the events tab when you go to the group. You can also find all of our past book clubs there as well. If you're catching up on the podcast and you want to do some of those previous book clubs that we've done, those are all still in our Facebook group. So you can read those books that we've already done and work through those questions too. They just kind of live perpetually there. So you can go back and answer questions from a year ago if you want to. That's totally cool. You can also find us on Instagram at Lutheran Ladies Lounge. You can share your thoughts about this book that we've just read, The Enchanted April, or the book that we're going to be reading, Wonderfully Made, on your Instagram. Tag us at Lutheran Ladies Lounge and share your thoughts there. Well, like I said, we do have our e-newsletter. If you're not on social media or you just like to get us in your inbox, you can find how to sign up for that e-newsletter in the show notes for this episode, or you can send us an email, lutheranladies@kfuo.org. Those go to all four of us, and we'll all get your messages there too.
I love them, all of them.
They're fantastic. Find all of our podcasts at kfuo.org/Lutheran Ladies Lounge, or on your favorite podcasting app, or on the KFUO radio app. You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Mrs. Fisher's macaroni fork.
I'm sorry, and I'm done. I need a vacation.
Yes, go.
Yes, go to Italy.
San Salvatore. How much do you want to bet those dudes were like, what are these crazy ladies doing?
Oh.
KFUO Radio and the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast are underwritten in part by Ad Crucem. Visit them online at adcrucem.com. Views and opinions expressed on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO Radio, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The Lutheran Ladies Lounge is produced by KFUO Radio and available at kfuo.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Join our community on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge.